It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.
Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, live from Dubai. A funny thing happened to me on the way to the studio I almost didn't have, but that's a story for later. Donald Trump goes bananas in New York. The little dictator who had no cards and who was risking World War III now has his full confidence and all the weapons that the European governments in NATO are prepared to buy him. He can apparently take back all of Ukraine and maybe go further. What does that mean? All the way to Moscow? Little Zelensky in the Kremlin? Well, I've just come from the Kremlin and I don't think he'd survive. Palestine is now recognized by even more countries in the world. But will it actually mean anything more than a row of beans? We'll be talking about the state of Donald Trump's mind and the state of affairs in Gaza, Jerusalem, and the West Bank, and many other things too. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
I'm live in Dubai, but I almost wasn't. 45 minutes ago, I was sound asleep sitting upright in a chair. Luckily, I was already dressed for the show because it's been a difficult journey for me and even more difficult for Gayatri, who isn't even here yet from Moscow for reasons too convoluted to go into in a 20-minute monologue. But I hope that she'll be here for her slot. Not only that, because I didn't have our portable studio. So my good friend Naheem Sharif, WM, 1F in Sharif, follow him on Instagram. Naheem Sharif from Longsight in Manchester, a Manchester United supporter at utterly ridiculous notice, got me this studio. And my good friend Clark facilitated all of it and is even providing my tea in the absence of my good wife. Many, many thanks to I love this place. It's very hot, of course, but I do love the United Arab Emirates. I used to be big around these parts. This watch was given to me by the late and great ruler of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Zayed. I used to spend a lot of hours talking about politics with him. In fact, he gave me so many watches, I had to ask him to stop, because every time he did, I had to register it in the House of Commons parliamentary register of interests, and people imagined I was walking around with an array of expensive watches all the way up my arm. But I miss him dearly, and every time I'm in Abu Dhabi, I visit his grave at the exquisite Sheikh Zayed Mosque. So I love these parts, although these parts have no responsibility whatsoever for anything I am now about to say. I have never seen a performance like Donald Trump's at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday. I mean, literally never seen it. Not in comedic form, not in dramatic form, and definitely not in United Nations diplomatic form. It ranged far and wide, I think we could say. It was a stream of consciousness that Shakespeare could not have written in the mouth of Falstaff. It was every foolish folly that he could ever imagine himself saying, trotted out to an assembly, well, the most powerful assembly on earth, at least on paper, though not, of course, in practice. He even managed to insult the King of England by saying that the King, and indeed all of us in Britain, are going to Sharia law. What does that actually mean? We're going to Sharia law. What, the House of Commons is going to introduce Sharia law in Britain? How idiotic a statement is that? And yet the President of the United States made it to the United Nations General Assembly. He also complained, mind you, when the escalator stopped dead just as him and Melania were getting on it. He had a point in the criticism of the estate management of the headquarters of the United Nations, but he told us that he had bid $500 million to make a marvelous, wonderful interior for the United Nations. It would have been a kind of Trump Tower United Nations. But they had chosen in their wisdom to go for a bid at $2.5 billion. And look at it, he said. The escalator doesn't work. My teleprompter has stopped working. And presumably, not having a teleprompter, no, it has never stopped me, has the responsibility for the stream of consciousness which followed. It ranged far and wide, much of it too ridiculous to seek to replicate. But the most important departure from the Donald Trump of the day before, and who knows, the Donald Trump of tomorrow, was that it's no longer Biden's war in the Ukraine. It's no longer a war that he would have stopped, solved, like the 9 other wars he's already stopped, solved. It's no longer a war he intends to stop in 24 hours. Oh no, this war with Russia is going to go on and on. Of course, he's no longer giving money for it. He doesn't like America's money going to European countries. He doesn't like America's money going even to Zelensky. But he was very clear that he will continue to supply weapons with which they can do as they wish. Very key point, that. And they're already doing it. Moscow airport, just the other day, almost saw an aviation disaster as an airplane, funnily enough, from the Emirates Air, was forced to skim the tops of skyscrapers, presumably with hundreds of passengers therein, because Ukraine was firing drones at residential areas in Moscow at the time. He said, Trump is going to continue delivering as many weapons as the European taxpayer is prepared to pay for. And that's where you come in, dear viewer. How many of you are prepared to keep on buying American weapons for the profit of the US arms companies to give to little Zelensky. But he was even more radically a new man when he said that Zelensky was one of the bravest men in the world and that he had the capability, as long as NATO kept giving him American weapons, not only to recover all of Ukraine, all of it, including Crimea, but even further, which was enigmatic to say the least, unless he meant a reverse ferret where Ukraine took even more Hungarian land or took even more Romanian land or took even more Polish land. He must have meant that Zelensky's army could march on Moscow. Now, many a tyrant has marched on Moscow, but none of them have survived to tell the tale. But it was basically a declaration of World War III. And that's important. Now, the fact that it contradicted all of his previous statements, including in the Oval Office itself, when he berated Zelensky, practically called him a thief, said that he had no cards, said that he was a dictator whose mandate had run out. Well, now Zelensky is effectively a Ben-Hur kind of figure who is going to go into battle with Donald Trump's full blessing. What that means for the relationship that we were told existed between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, one can only guess at. He called Russia, in this stream of consciousness, a paper tiger. Though Russia answered rather well today and said, we're not a tiger at all, we're a bear, and you don't get paper bears. He said that the Russian economy was crashing, but as you know, I've just left it and it's booming. And all international figures prove that it's booming. Its growth rate for the year far exceeded the growth rate of the United Kingdom and exceeded the growth rate of the United States of America. He said there were queues at the petrol stations. But I'm here to tell you that is a complete lie. I've been all over Moscow and Nizhny Novgorod, and not a single queue at a single petrol station was there. Why would there be? Russia has oil, petrol, gas, coal, gold, silver, minerals, everything that you can imagine coming out of their ears. The ruble is the best performing currency in the world right at this moment. But Donald Trump, the man who told us the British were going to Sharia law, says that the Russian economy is crashing and says that, well, Zelensky might well be in a position to take Moscow itself. It's bizarre beyond words, but words mean something, especially when they're uttered from the podium of the United Nations in New York. Even if there's no teleprompter involved, somebody is whispering ridiculous foolishness in the ear of the American president, because he didn't come up with that himself. He didn't allege there were queues at the petrol stations because he read it in the New York Times. He didn't read it anywhere. Somebody told him it. He didn't decide that Zelensky was no longer a dictator with no cards, but was in fact a man who could go all the way. He didn't read that in the New York Times. Somebody told him that. He's listening to some very dangerous voices indeed. Now, life is definitely stranger than fiction. I have just learned in the last 5 minutes before coming on the air that Nicolas Cage in 1998 starred in a Hollywood movie as a populist, rabble-rousing politician called Charliekirk. And he was assassinated by a bullet to the neck by somebody called Tyler. Tyler Robinson, the man who assassinated Charliekirk to the neck. In parenthesis, I also just learned in the last 5 minutes from my good friend Clark, a Scotsman like myself, that in the 1890s, somebody called Ingersoll Lockwood published a series of novels called The Baron Trump Adventures. And the said Baron Trump is brought to Earth in a time machine in Times Square by a rocket man called Elon. I am not making any of this up. So Charlie Kirkland, played by Nicolas Cage, was shot in the neck by a guy called Tyler. Well, you, like me, may be beginning to think that the Charlie Kirk affair is itself a Hollywood movie because it has more moving parts, more patsies, more decoys, more obvious lunatic assertions by the state. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby was nothing compared to the foolishness of what you've been told to believe by the state in the United States of America about the murder of Charlie Kirk. I told you I was one of the first in the world to say this. That terrible wound from which you saw Charlie Kirk's life's blood leaving his body was not the entry wound, but was an exit wound. And that is now proven beyond peradventure. Now that's important because if that was the exit wound and the entry wound came from the other side, that means Tyler ain't the shooter. And it means that gun isn't the murder weapon. And you have to ask yourself, if they're lying about the shooter, if they're lying about the murder weapon, they're lying about the whole thing. It's obvious. They're trying to tell you a furry. My God, I never thought I'd live long enough to know what a furry was. And I now know more about furries than I ever wanted to know. A furry whose boyfriend, girlfriend is a trans and who was found wandering on a roof but didn't have a weapon that was found in the woods. He's the patsy, all right. He may even believe that he was involved in it. He may have been told it was a Nicolas Cage movie. He may have been told anything, but he wasn't the shooter. And that weapon with the scope on wrong, such that it would have blown his eye out if he'd fired the shot from a Mauser, that wasn't the murder weapon. The murder weapon came from far more up close and personal. And personal may be a vital qualifier in the statement I have just made. Because it seems to me that who killed Charlie Kirk knew Charlie Kirk and maybe knew him very well. I've only got time, I think, to turn briefly to the events around Palestine, though there's much else I would like to say. You heard me on Wednesday about the recognition of the Palestinian state. Of course, I'm happy that countries that used to deny there was anything called Palestine now recognize there's a Palestine state. I'm happy that my formerly good friends in the British consulate in Jerusalem are now employees of the British embassy in Jerusalem, though that has not yet been formally gazetted. I'm happy that the address of the British consulate in Jerusalem is now listed as Palestine. I'm happy about that. I've got to be happy if I see Netanyahu unhappy. I've got to be happy if I see all these shills for Israel scurrying around, including Netanyahu's son who lives in Florida. No Gaza Strip military service for him. He's living in a hotel suite in Florida. He announced, well, I now recognize the state of French Caledonia, of Corsica, and so on. Another stream of consciousness, like Donald Trump's. I'm happy when I see these people unhappy. But I have to repeat the point that I made to you on Sunday in the last show. Which Palestine is it that they are recognizing? The West Bank is already flooded with 800,000 illegal settlers. Jerusalem is having its Arab population systematically destroyed. And not just Muslim population, by the way. Even the Greek Orthodox Church is having its land stolen by settlers in the eastern half of the city. Jerusalem is being ethnically cleansed. A great replacement, maybe some on the American right will recognize that term, is taking place in the West Bank. And Netanyahu has said he's put 800,000 illegal settlers in to the West Bank, and he's going to double it. That means 1,600,000 illegal settlers. And don't imagine they're in log cabins. Don't imagine they're in rolled wagons. They're in cities with swimming pools and sprinklers. And of course, those sprinklers are fueled by water stolen from Palestinian farmers who don't even have enough water to keep their olive trees alive, to be uprooted by the above-mentioned settlers. If there's 1,600,000 settlers in the West Bank, if Gaza is a pile of ash and rubble and bones, skeletons and blood, where is this Palestine that you are all queuing up now, rather belatedly, to recognize? What is this Palestine going to be when the British Prime Minister can tell them who they're allowed to elect to govern them, where the French president can declare they will not be allowed to have an army? What is this we're talking about here? Is this an independent state you're recognizing, or is this a kind of game that you are playing to divert attention from so many things that have fallen out of the news? Where's the Epstein files? Who's doing anything about the 50 ships of a flotilla headed for Gaza now being droned every night, even though it's filled with your own citizens? And the boats are flying your own flags. And you still haven't said one word about it. You think we're all going to calm down because of the letter heading of the British consulate in Jerusalem? All of this and more, much more, coming up over the next 2 hours. It is, after all, the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
Okay, here's tonight's poll. Will Netanyahu erase Palestine? Yes or no? You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on X, my X, which is going great guns. But if you haven't followed me yet, on X or on Facebook, where I crossed the 1 million follower mark this week, and I'm very grateful to everyone for that. You can vote on the YouTube community poll or on the YouTube stream, or on Patreon, Patreon is my vanguard, without whom I literally could not survive. Patreon and YouTube Stream, YouTube Community Poll, X, and Telegram are the portals through which you can have your say on will Netanyahu erase Palestine. Well, 20,000 people have already voted, and I'm only now announcing it. So get busy on that. Phone numbers, if you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the international number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, my good friend, Daniel McAdam, is Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace. There are not enough Ron Pauls in the American Congress, and there certainly ain't no peace. Daniel, thanks for joining us again to survey what you might call the wreckage of an extraordinary week in your country. I'm not even referring to the crime scene at the ICE facility and the mass shootings and so on. I'm trying to stay on the big picture. Donald Trump declared World War III yesterday at the United Nations. He gave the dogs of war the green light to go as far as they can. That must have dismayed you and the rest at the Ron Paul Institute.
Well, thanks for having me back on, George. I really appreciate it. It's always great talking to you and listening to you. When I first read his Truth Social post, I thought he had completely lost his mind. Because, I mean, we all know that he repeats the last person he talked to. And I think I reposted on X saying, well, we know that he met with Zelensky now because he's singing a completely different tune. But, I got up this morning and I read my good friend Larry Johnson, a former CIA officer who has a great blog, Sonar 21. And he had a different take. And the more I thought about Larry's take, the more it actually made sense. And if you look at it in a certain way, and you have to sort of use your super secret spy glasses to understand it, in a way, he's sort of washing his hands of Ukraine. He's doing it in a very odd way, but he is basically saying, hey, Ukraine, you guys, you got this. You take back all your territory. You get a chunk of Russia too if you want to. But it's going to be the Europeans and NATO, as if we're not part of NATO. But nevertheless, it's going to be the Europeans are going to finance it and NATO's going to do it. I think it's just a way of washing his hands. I think he did kind of a Pontius Pilate.
Well, of course, that's one reading of it. It's not the reading that Zelensky obviously has taken. It's not the reading reflected in the European media today. They're packing their kit bags for the front. It's not the reading in Moscow, where it was all seen as an exceedingly unfriendly series of acts, the speech, the Truth Social posting. But it might be true. It is extraordinary how Donald Trump has begun to refer to NATO in the third person, like the United States wasn't in NATO, wasn't the mainstay of NATO. How's it being treated in the U.S. media? Is it
and as if we don't
now?
And as if we don't. I'm sorry. Yes. I was just going to say, as if we don't fund about 73% of NATO, so you can't pretend that it's not you when you're funding. It's just like President Trump pretended that he's a neutral, referee of this war when we're in fact we're arming one side. But I did notice in Russia the response wasn't, perhaps I missed something, but the response wasn't, aside from Medvedev, which we've come to expect good things from, but there really wasn't a radical response. I mean, maybe even as we speak, the meeting between Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and Foreign Minister Lavrov is taking place with the two teams. You would think if they took it as seriously, and even Peskov sort of made light of it, as you pointed out in your monologue a bit ago. We're not a tiger, we're a bear, and there's no such thing as paper bears. You would have thought it would have been, had he really meant this and been taken to have meant it, that you might have heard a stronger response from Moscow. Now, again, you may have heard something that I didn't. I just got back from our studio, but it didn't seem as strong as I thought it might be.
Well, again, that's a very fair point, counterpoint. But the stock market crashed. The Russian stock market crashed on the absorbing of what, on the face of it, appeared to be a declaration of forever war. Ever since Trump took office 8 months ago, they've been waiting for this peace dividend that Trump promised in his election campaign. And yet there's no sign of it. And after this week, it's even farther away on the horizon. But time will tell. Rubio's talks with the master, Lavrov, are going to be important. That's true. Trump says the most important meeting he had in New York was with the Arab and Muslim heads of state, foreign ministers, and top officials. What do you think he meant by that? What was he discussing with them? He said that he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. And of course, that's good news if true, but how can we tell it is true? And in any case, what's the difference between annexation and doubling the number of illegal settlers on the West Bank?
It's de facto the same thing. You're absolutely correct. And I wonder about Trump. I mean, I think the world, certainly America, certainly myself, are experiencing Trump fatigue. I was glad that he was elected. I was hoping good things from him. But I think people are getting tired of these constant flip-flops. I mean, here he is a couple of days ago complaining Netanyahu is blanking me. And I won't use the word, obviously, on your show. Well, if he's blanking you, why don't you tell him to stop? If you don't want him to blank you, you can tell him to stop. And he doesn't seem to be able to do that. Obviously, the attack at Qatar was known by the U.S. It could have been stopped by the U.S. Probably could have even been stopped by Qatar. So what is going on, and how think about how much you destroy the credibility of the United States when the United States is following the Israeli lead of pretending to want peace, of getting a peace delegation together, and this even goes back to Soleimani assassination, and then killing the peace envoys. So who's the next person to sit down and discuss peace with the United States? I hope it's not either of us, George.
Me too. There would definitely be a drone or two in the vicinity. Well, that to happen, Dan. Let's talk, if we can, about your friends in the media. I mean, you're not a conservative, but you are on the right. You're a libertarian. The figures that we had come to associate most with Trumpism, with the Trump way, the pure red flame of MAGA and so on, do appear to be getting farther and farther away from Trump's presidency. And it's only 8 months old. I watched Tucker Carlson today. It's a miracle to behold. I believe in miracles, as it happens. It is a miracle that Tucker Carlson can state, as he did on Greenwald's show today, that he's just tired of making Israel first, making Israel great again, of the American interest being sacrificed for Netanyahu, whom he described as a danger to the world. That's a long distance. The Tucker Carlson who was at the victory celebration last November of Donald Trump's victory. And he's not alone. Candaceowens, even sometimes Bannon, even sometimes Alex Jones. All these figures of the right are beginning to see the light, but Trump ain't. How do you explain that?
Well, there's a civil war on for the right in America, and there was a great article by Jack Hunter in Responsible Statecraft, I think it was yesterday, that discusses openly the civil war now that it is being fought around Israel. There's a huge portion and growing of the right, which can't stand. In the words of megynkelly, who I never thought would be uttered from her lips, she said, all of America under 30 hates Israel, and that's not usually something you get from the approved right-wing talk show host. So as you point out very well, when it even can permeate the sort of elite tier alternative, if you will, right-wing media, then you know that it's broken out in the open. And the last people on earth to know it or understand it are members of the United States House of Representatives and also the different state legislative bodies who, as this was all happening, were actually in Israel. 250 state representatives in the U.S. were in Israel for this bizarre 50 states and one Israel kind of festivity. So they will be the last ones to know, and maybe they'll be the last ones when the money runs out to look around and realize why America hates them.
It is astounding that this civil war has broken out, and one is bound to speculate, I hope you don't find it tasteless, whether that civil war engulfed Charliekirk, because I'm seeing more and more evidence that Charliekirk, if you forgive the pun, was at a turning point on his attitude to Israel. And was that anything to do with what happened to him? And anyway, what happened to him? Any thoughts, Dan?
I think there's absolutely a case that could be made, and I think there are brave people like Max Blumenthal who's uncovered a lot of information. They just come out with a piece yesterday saying that one of Kirk's last Zionist billionaires had decided to stop funding. And you can imagine what went on behind the scenes, the pressure behind the scenes, and also the pressure on Charlie running a multi-million-dollar organization with a lot of families probably that relied on that organization and the fundraising, the enormous amount of pressure. And everyone talks about it. Tucker Carlson, who knew him personally, talks about it. Candaceowens talks about it, how much pressure he was on toward the end. It's all about means and motive. We know that the Israeli government is the number one assassination machine on earth. They will do it at the drop of a hat. They will kill Americans without hesitation. We know they have the means. Do they have the motive? Well, even Netanyahu himself has talked about the fact that they need to find a way to censor young Americans because young Americans have turned against Israel. To what extent would they go to silence young American conservatives, especially the leaders of a massive populist movement like Charliekirk? To what extent may they go to silence him? A few years ago, I would have not entertained the thought. But what I've seen, the carnage in Gaza, nothing would surprise me with these people.
No, and so much material is now available to us. It's not like, you're too young to know, Daniel, but, we had nothing to go on the JFK assassination, except the circumstantial oddity of a guy shooting the guy that shot the president. And when we got to know who that guy was, what that guy was, that began to arouse suspicion. But it was years before we even saw Zapruder. Here we've got camera angles from 500 cameras. Here we've got data, ballistics data, that casts, well, to put it mildly, severe doubt on the official FBI story. Kashpatel must be under real pressure now, don't you think?
Well, there's a rumor that his girlfriend is Israeli, so he may be under a lot of pressure anyway on this. But as you pointed out when you started your monologue on this, there are hundreds and hundreds of ultra high definition cameras. Why are we only getting a few grainy pieces of film? Why can't we see the entire thing? If there's nothing to it, if George Galloway, Daniel McAdams, Tucker Carlson, we're all kooks, it would be so easy to dispel all of this just by letting us see all of the different angles. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe it's out there and I just haven't seen it, but I haven't seen any quality video yet.
No, nobody has. Finally, Daniel, and on a not necessarily unadjacent point, whatever happened to the Epstein files?
Well, Thomas Massie is trying to get them out, the representative from Kentucky, and Trump's doing his best to get Massie kicked out of office. You have to ask yourself, why? What is it? Is it because Massie, who had been a loyal friend of President Trump, who stood by him after January 6th, who opposed all of the ridiculous attempts to get him to kick him out of office, stood by his side. Now, all of a sudden, trying to do this, he becomes public enemy number one. Again, if there's no there, let us see it. Let us see what's going on. Even Kashpatel before the House committee a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about the files. But then, hold on a minute, you just said that there are no files. So which is it? Are there files that there's nothing on, or are there no files at all? We still don't have that information, and it's severely undermining Donald Trump's popularity among his base.
I would have thought so, and it was a very polarized dichotomy in the first place. Half the country hated him, and half the country liked him quite a lot. But if you begin to lose the people that liked you quite a lot, chances are you're looking at a losing hand. I know it's a long way to November next, but there must be a real danger of the Republicans losing control in the midterms, and that would put the skids right under any idea that Donald Trump has founded a dynasty, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. We'd be going back to endless impeachments. The problem is that the Democrats have nothing to bring to the table. They're not the party of the working man, the Democratic Party that my grandparents supported because we were working class. They're not the party of the working man. They're the party of the billionaire elites, of the oligarchs. They have absolutely nothing to offer America. If anyone doubts that, just go watch the latest Kamala Harris interview and you'll be disabused of that feeling. If they only had something to offer, then they might be more of a threat than they are. But it's right there on the table for the taking. But the Democrats are doing nothing to do it.
We need more Ron Pauls. We need more Daniel McAdams. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Mother of All Talk
Thank you, good sir.
Let me take a quick break, and then I'll take your calls. Stay tuned. Donald, what would you like to say?
Well, hi, George. I hope I can keep myself relevant because of my blood pressure, which goes up when considering that they're insulting my intelligence, in particular in regards to the Gaza situation, to say it lightly. It is ridiculous how these things are characterized, particularly in the people's minds of who's right and who's wrong and who's on the best side of history, as terrorists. What is this? Is absolutely insult to the intelligence of anybody in the right-thinking human being.
It is. But we have to face something, Donald. You are an exception in Copenhagen. I never watch or listen to mainstream news or read it. But today, for some reason, I heard the Global Newsroom hourly news bulletin. And it was as different a perspective as you and I could possibly imagine. And the parallel universe that we are living in. Admittedly, more and more of our society is finding its news and its analysis in places like this, the mother of all talk shows, and other similar events. But the great majority still of our fellow citizens are getting their news and analysis from their national equivalent of the global newsroom. For them, black is white. War is peace. They are the masters of doublespeak and distortion, because I realized that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who listened to that news bulletin but did not know what you, Donald, in Copenhagen, and I, and the other people watching this know. And that's a measure of how far we've yet to travel.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Get voting on the poll. Will Netanyahu erase Palestine? Get hitting the telephone lines. In the US, it's toll-free, and US and Canada, actually, it's +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in Britain and Ireland. 08081 965522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 96626. 888-203-1025. Let's go to California, where Josh wants to talk about Trump. On you go, Josh.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I wanted to talk about what a disappointment yesterday was. You know, while the entire permanent membership of the Security Council, except for the United States, as well as most of Western Europe, are now supporting Palestinian statehood, and as much as various emirs and kings, buttered Trump up on the way to the UN at the 23rd, he still stuck to the pan. Instead of showing up and living up to his historical potential and being a star, he flopped and refused to adjust the aggressive posture of the United States. And it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if he's going to get the message, not only about the statehood of Palestine, but of the aggressive posture of the United States in modern times.
Well, if only it were butter, Josh. It's gold and diamonds. It's pearls. The Arab Gulf states are showering Donald Trump with personal riches, and they are investing in Donald Trump's economy, in the American economy. And yet it seems to make no difference. This can't all be about a casino owner's wife in Las Vegas who made a one-off donation. It's something more systematic than that, isn't it? They have burrowed their way into the American political system to the point that the rest of the world can barely believe what they're seeing and hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they should know what they're seeing and hearing. Not only have they seen it before, but within the context of an organization like the UN formed after World War II, they should be able to easily recognize, what's happening, which is a posture of appeasement towards someone who has an aggressive international military stance. It should be easy to see.
And it should be. And people like Tuckercarlson have clearly seen it with blinding clarity. I mean, Saul on his road to Damascus didn't convert as completely as Tuckercarlson has converted. What's it like in California? What's it like in the people you know and talk to?
The people in the United States are very prone to, as much freedom of speech as they have, the sheer fear that they have of their neighbors prevents them from speaking out too much until they can repeat something that they hear from one of their neighbors. So the thoughts on Trump, they don't outwardly waver much, right? As much as people may privately be harboring changes of opinion, still, I don't get out much, but still you're not likely to hear a sea change in the outward conversation. That's kind of the nature of America, is with all of the free speech, the most important things that they say still remain unspoken.
And yet Megynkelly's comment, which is ringing in my ears, and Daniel McAdam just repeated it there, Megynkelly, of all people, said everybody in America under 30 hates Israel. And if you include those that are over 30, that's a lot of people.
And I think that, look, between the theories about who's responsible for the charliekirk assassination to just kind of the general irrational fear and hatred of Jewish people, it would actually probably shock a lot of people how many Americans, again, harbor anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist state rather sentiment, but are still not they want to express that indirectly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you. Of course, I absolutely do. Josh in California, thanks very much indeed for that. My screen has slowed up, so I don't know if we've got another caller on the line, but there are some comments. And I'll go to Walter in Blackpool, California to Blackpool. That is a juxtaposition. Walter, good to hear from you again. What would you like to say?
Well, I was interested to hear you talk about the wound to the neck in Kirk's case. Now, the thing is that this has strong echoes of the assassination of JFK, because there too there was a wound to the neck or to the throat. Yeah. Now, the official version was that was an exit wound, because obviously, if Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy, that would have to be an exit wound. Yet all the doctors at Parkland Hospital, which treated JFK, said that it was an entry wound. So again, that proves that there was more than one shooter, and therefore automatically that there was a conspiracy. Now, the thing is that you know about the single bullet theory, according to which the bullet entered Kennedy's back, then traveled upwards, and then emerged from his throat, which is pretty fantastical at the best of times. So there are very strong echoes emerging between Charlie Kirk's murder and that of Kennedy, and also the sheer falsity of the narrative that surrounded it.
And as I made the point to Daniel just a minute ago, Walter, you and I were roughly the same age. We had nothing to go on, and we were suspicious of the Kennedy case. Look at what we've got to go on now. Look at the acres of footage, the ballistics experts, audio, sound. We've got so many weird circumstantial points of a plane taking off 12 minutes after the killing, turning its transponder off, heading somewhere, coming back. Who owns the plane? One of the top donors of the Lubavitch extremist Jews in the United States, whose drones were hurtling across the sky, almost too fast to see. And why were they there? Who mopped up after the crime? And why? Why is the crime scene now a construction site when we don't even have a clue yet who was all involved in this?
Yeah, that's right. And also, of course, you mentioned that the gun was a Mauser. Now, that too is very interesting, because Roger Craig was one of the policemen on duty at the time of the killing. He said that, contrary to the official narrative that it was a Carcano rifle, that he saw actually the indelible stamp of the Mauser rifle on the gun that was initially discovered in the building.
And the man who took the footage of what is said to be Tyler Robinson running across the roof and jumping off it, he said that the actual shooter was in full tactical gear with a face mask and with pads and so on. The whole thing just doesn't add up, even to seasoned observers of things that don't add up, like thee and me, Walter. Thanks very much for the call. Let me take some of your comments. You know, you can scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. And if they're clean and pithy, I'll read them out, like this one. Nigel McClatchy says, will Netanyahu erase Palestine? I don't know. I don't want to think about it. I just saw the documentary film, Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk, and it was heartrending. I haven't seen that film, Nigel. Thanks for the tip on that. Any more comments? Natalie M. says Palestine recognition is performative. To what borders? A point I was making myself. Jack Klugman, great name, says the head chopper of ISIS is being feted in NYC, and Palestinian children injured by our weapons are banned from getting treatment here. This is who we are. New York, so great they maimed it twice. Will Netanyahu erase Palestine is the question of the poll tonight. Get voting. Anthony Wedgwood says all eyes on Gaza and the West Bank. All eyes on the flotilla convoy who were under drone attack last night for delivering aid. The Israeli regime are doing more and more damage to themselves by the day. Indeed, that is true. Some more comments are coming in. They're just a bit slow to reach my computer, but we're getting there. Veronique Stino says Palestine existed for more than 2,000 years. Strange to recognize it now. We need not recognize the Israeli invasion. Look, there's a legend on the line, all the way from Oklahoma. It's the one and only May who wants to talk about Donald Trump. May, were you cringing when you watched your president addressing the world? Because I was cringing for every America.
Oh, actually, George, I haven't gotten a chance to watch it, but everything I've heard about it makes me cringe just to hear. And by the way, hello, my dear friend. Hello to Gayatri and your whole team.
Thank you.
I just want to ask one little favor of you and your group, and I wouldn't normally, but tomorrow's my birthday, so anyone who wants to send me a happy thought, I will appreciate that. But
happy
the
birthday,
thing I want to
May.
talk about. Do what?
Happy birthday, many happy returns.
I appreciate that. I'm just distraught about Gaza as usual. And I totally agree that all this recognition of Palestine is just silly. They're just trying to appease their publics, because if they really believed in it, they would have done it a long time ago, before Gaza was before Palestine was pretty much disappeared.
Although May, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you just for a second. Of course, I'll let you back in. It does give us an advantage agitationally. We're now able to say to our governments, alas, not yours. We're now able to say to our governments, you've recognized the Palestinian state. What are you going to do about the fact that it is currently being destroyed in front of our eyes? That's a step forward, May. Back to you.
I agree, and I'll give them some credit for that. I wish I could give our own country that same credit. My main thoughts today are on the Trump merry-go-round. He's looking for the brass ring and just keeps going past and picking a different animal every time and hoping that it will go up and down and he'll bring him to the proper place where he'll get the right answer. Unfortunately, he always thinks he has the right answer instead of honestly looking for it. I wish he would talk to some wise people like the people you talk to. I'm especially am excited to see Judge Napolitano today. But everyone that you would have good advice for President Trump if only he would ever listen to them. And it makes me sad that he listens to people who
Oscar Wilde, I think it was Oscar Wilde, though it might have been Bernard Shaw, described someone as being the kind of fellow that bore like a sofa, bore the impression of the last person to sit on them. I think we've concluded that Trump is like that. Whoever spoke to him last stands a reasonably good chance of hearing their views through the trumpet of Donald Trump's mouth. Isn't that right?
I believe it. And the problem is, why can't we import one of these people that we like to go talk to him? Scott Ritter would be a great choice to just try to talk some sense into him. But anyway, the merry-go-round goes around and around and around. And where it's going to end, nobody knows. but I think he's just looking for the brass ring.
I think so too. May in Oklahoma, thank you very much. You rightly helped me by mentioning that we have the mother of all guests coming up after the break. Judge Andrew Napolitano is exactly the man that Donald Trump should be listening to. He should be in the White House. Judge Andrew was loyal to Trump, like Colonel Douglas McGregor also. Senior people with serious intellects and with a serious take on world events have all been banished from Donald Trump's circle. They simply don't get an in. And who banished them and why doesn't take too much working out. Now, it's time for tonight's Wall of Fame. Are you a MOATS donor yet, by the way? I do hope that you'll go to moats.tv and donate to the show. The midweek show cannot continue unless we get the relevant, requisite number of donations from the public. And it's never been easier to do it. You can support the show through Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. And many, many good people have done that and have done it loyally right from the very beginning. But it's easier to do it by going to the website, moats.tv. And if you do that, you'll find that within 2 minutes, you could be on this Wall of Fame. Like Andrew Skilleter, David Harkin, Jeff Woodland, Kelly Bonfim, and Aaron Turgeman. A big thanks to each and every one of you. These are the top donors. They're on the Wall of Fame. But if you've only got $1 or €1 or £1, leave that. Many a muckle makes a mackle, or whatever the Scottish is. I'll be right back after the break with the one and only Judge Andrew Napolitano. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk show. Go ahead, John.
You recognize that, mass immigration is driven by wars, and that ultimately, people ought to be repatriated, and the conditions, and so on need to be laid to facilitate that. But I feel like it doesn't fully address, the concerns of people who are not happy with, like, the exponentially rising levels of immigration. They don't necessarily feel like they have a duty to go about understanding it and wrapping their head around all the complexities of international politics. They just know that they want their country to be, to culturally sort of resemble what their country nominally is. And I suppose it puts you, to some extent, in an inconvenient spot, given, where you found the most political strength and the demographics and so on. But, I don't know.
Any spot? No, John, it doesn't put me in any spot at all. And even if it did, you think I would change my answer because it put me in a spot? I say things because I believe that they are right. The issue of immigration and the issue of refugees are not the same thing. And neither of them is the same thing as color or race or ethnicity. These are all different things. I was born and grew up before there was mass immigration, and Britain was lousy. It was lousy. All these culture wars have always raged. You just know about them more now. Now, I'm against mass immigration. Nothing to do with color or race, ethnicity or culture. It's about economics. The only people who are in favor of mass immigration are lunatic liberals, anarchists, and rich monopoly capitalists. That's obvious, isn't it? So I'm against mass immigration because in a capitalist society, that can only worsen the terms and conditions of my members, of the working class that I try to represent and champion.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I'm quite proud of that little rap you just heard. I haven't properly listened to it before, and it reminded me of one of the many facets of Donald Trump's remarkable performance at the UN. He was ranting and raving against immigration. Now, how any American can be against immigration when every single one of them is from immigrant stock always amuses me. But Trump in particular, Trump's grandfather was an immigrant from Germany. His mother was an immigrant from Scotland. He has married 2 immigrants, and most of his children are the children of immigrant women. And how you get the balls to stand up in front of the whole world and try and make immigrants feel small when you're the president of a country that annihilated almost every one of the native people of what is now the United States of America, not to mention shipped millions of black people in irons and put them to work as slaves. And then, well, 100 years later, 150 years later, you're Mr. Anti-Immigrant. Your name is Donald Trump. If it wasn't for Scotland, Donald Trump, you wouldn't exist because your mother was an immigrant from Scotland. Well, will Netanyahu erase Palestine? Yes or no? This poll is going big licks now, and I'm not sure that the right side is winning. Get voting. You've got about 45 minutes. Judge Andrew Napolitano will be along shortly, and he is always worth watching. But before that, let's take some calls. Tarek is in New York, who wants to reminisce about certain tunnels that were found in Brooklyn. Tarek.
Yes, sir. How are you, sir? All right. First of all, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for being a positive role model to humanity, and your points of view is greatly appreciated. Your ethics, your level of integrity, and your humanity, your kindness is greatly appreciated. And now, as for myself, as being yes, sir. As for myself, as having worked and for the United States government for many years in prisons, including in Rikers Island, where I worked with female and male offenders who were being raped, tortured, worked in the New York City Police Department, community policing, street narcotics, organized crime as an undercover cop, and noticing the abuse to the poor communities, the lack of respect for the people in the poor communities have been very disturbing. And unfortunately, as I reported these crimes, much retaliation was committed against me. I then went to work for the United States government at the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Brooklyn, New York, 8029th Street, where they had Peter Gotti, Al Sharpton, the Russian-Israeli mafia, the Indian-Chinese mafia, pagans, Hells Angels, Latin Kings, Nietes, Trentarios, the Bloods, the Crips. And I again became a whistleblower because I observed not only were male and female offenders being assaulted, being raped, and the government again failed to provide care, custody, and control of the prison population. And the number of narcotics that was entering the United States prison system was very disturbing, far more disturbing than when I worked in Rikers Island in C-76, Rose M. Singer, and Forbell, as male and female offenders were being raped They were being tortured and raped, not only from correction officers, sir. They were being raped from prisoners. And I want to tell you, as a law enforcement officer, the number of children that were being trafficked through the Mexican border has been very disturbing. The number of children that go missing in Disney World that's controlled by the United States government is very disturbing. The number of children that go missing daily in the United States of America without any concern of the government is very disturbing. The number and the rise of homelessness in the United States, mental illness, mass incarcerations, illegal incarcerations, illegal search and seizures, racial profiling is very disturbing. And far more disturbing, sir, is the $4.5 billion Larry Silverstein obtained after 9/11. I also want to tell you that there were a number of alleged suicides and people that claimed to have died during the FBI investigation of Bill de Blasio, Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, who pardoned a lot of high-profile criminals, and Bill de Blasio, where a New York City police captain...
Well, look, I'll tell you what, Tarek. Your stream of consciousness was much better than Donald Trump's. At least yours had a point. At least yours made a lot of people sit up and think something other than that president is a lunatic. I can't possibly comment on some of the statements that you have made, but the more you talked, the more I realized how unqualified, utterly unqualified. You called me a role model. The United States ain't no role model, bruv. The United States is a state of dysfunctionality to such an extreme extent, as you have just demonstrated as a former New York Police Department, law enforcement officer, prison officer, that made your hair stand on end. And I'm sure the other viewers feel the same. Tarek in New York never did get to the tunnels in Brooklyn, which was what I was told he wanted to talk about. But boy, did he make many other points. Raymond is in Arkansas. He wants to talk about surveillance, something I myself am highly interested in. Raymond, welcome.
Welcome, and I'll skip the formalities because I'm limited on time till the judge calls. But it's about the tectonic panopticon of hyper surveillance and control, and I want to, since he took us back a little bit, let's go forward. Take a deep breath and let's look forward. Now the Earth, it wants to hum at about 6 hertz. Currently, our Schumann resonance is peaking to about 40 to 60 hertz. Now your power coming out of the wall over there is 50 hertz. Our power over here is 60 hertz. You understand the sinusoidal waveform of the Earth is singing at the same frequency as what's coming out of your wall. Now above this crust that's supposed to hum at 6 hertz, you got all your 2, 3, 4, 5G, UHF, VHF, all the RF radio bands, and then above that you have a satellite and with your Starlinks. And the Starlink satellites emit so much radiation that a ground-based telescope can't even see through them, and it obscures the cosmos. And in between these layers, you have a thick conductive soup that we breathe in every day that has heavy metal nanoparticulates in it for, purposes of weather manipulation and such. So what I'm saying is, if our impact on how the Earth resonates and like it's surging to 40 to 60 hertz, how long before the bottom drops out? Because here's what a lot of people have discovered, and down low in the tech community, they actually believe they can induce a heart attack with 3 hertz. Because the psychotics, they like doing this kind of research. They believe if they can deliver that to a human, they'll have heart failure. Well, what if the Earth decides that it doesn't like a blanket of electric on top of it, and then a conductive air column that produces the most fantastical lightning shows, and you've seen them, And then, of course, we're just we're screwing up the whole groove, George. We're screwing up the whole groove. And so the Lord's been telling me...
you made a very good case. You made a very good case, Raymond, in Arkansas. You definitely proved this is the open university of the airwaves. Frankly, you lost me at 4 hertz, or was it 40 hertz? It was all over my head, literally, as well as metaphorically. but you made a very, very good case for the fact that we appear to be doomed, that we appear to be entering the last days, the end of times, and whether it will be 5G or 6G that is the final nail in the coffin of humanity, who knows? Thanks for a bamboozling call. I'm sure there were better educated people watching than I who followed it entirely. Now, look, the podcast, I need to plug this because we are breaking into the charts everywhere, including in the most unlikely places, like Israel. There's an ethical issue there. Is there any way we can stop our podcast being downloaded in Israel? Are we breaking the boycott by our podcast being in the charts now in Israel? I don't know. But anyway, you can scan the QR code on the corner of the screen now. But here we are, the number one politics podcast in Iraq. And we've entered the top 10 in Russia, Nigeria, the Cayman Islands. I mean, I once gave a speech to the Cayman Islands Celtic Supporters Club. Who knew that in the Cayman Islands, they are listening in significant numbers to the mother of all talk shows? And our good friends in South Africa, back in the top 10 there, and very happy to be so. Will Netanyahu erase Palestine? Yes or no? That is the question being posed on the poll this evening. Now, I'm still waiting for the judge. Don't worry, he's definitely coming, but he has asked us to bear with him. Meanwhile, let's talk with Chris in Burton-upon-Trent about charliekirk. I can't get this Nicolas Cage coincidence out of my mind. Chris, have you got anything new for me?
Well, I've got a new Nicholas for you, although you've probably heard of him. I was saying to your producer, I've been ill recently, so I've been spending far too much time looking at this devastating war in Gaza that's terrible, and really finding you. I'm a new fan. You're fantastic, by the way. But I want to talk more about this Nick Fuentes guy. He's sort of like Charlie Kirk's arch nemesis in America. So you've got, as everybody knows, you've got Charlie Kirk, who's at all the universities, converted everybody to conservatism. Then you've got this Nick Fuentes guy, and he is just like, he's every ism in the world. He sort of agrees with Charlie Kirk on everything, apart from one huge matter. This Nick Fuentes guy, he's all about America first, not Israel first. So you've got Charlie Kirk on one end of the spectrum, and Nick Fuentes on the other. And Nick Fuentes is preaching to all his fans, and his fans are these groypers, which everybody's heard about. And I'm watching, I wouldn't normally be a fan of somebody like Nick Fuentes, but, with the internet you get there. So I'm watching this Nick Fuentes at 5 a.m. in the morning deliver his daily podcast. And all that he's doing, he's accusing Charlie Kirk of not being a Christian, because how can you let all these children in Gaza? It's atrocious. So he can't be a Christian. He's not America first because he's Israel first. He's calling out all these Israeli donors that Charlie Kirk's got. He's calling out all these Israelis with this, this massive influence on Donald Trump and the White House, and effectively the world, essentially. And I'm learning quite a lot from this Nick Fuentes. But here's the thing, Nick Fuentes' fans, so I'm watching this live chat, there's got 15,000 people in there, and every single person, George, in this live chat has not got one good word to say about Charlie Kirk. Nick Fuentes and his fans are petitioning for this big debate in America between Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk. And if you go on Charlie Kirk's Twitter at the time, and Nick Fuentes' it's, they're actually turning up on these college campuses, George, and they are literally campaigning for Nick Fuentes to debate Charlie Kirk on the unwanted influence on the Israeli government over Donald Trump. Not only that, the Gaza war. You've got I call them far right. You've got far right groupers, and credit to them. They don't want this war in Gaza. They don't want all these children being killed. And women.
No, that's right. I mean, what's left and what's right is, of course, an extremely fluid at this point in time. There's a lot of political cross-dressing. You've got people like Tuckercarlson and Candaceowens, who would once have been a million miles from me politically, agreeing with me, and I agreeing with them, on the central issues of our time, which are Gaza, Israel, Palestine, and the need to avoid World War III in the Ukraine. For now, there might be another casus belli along in a minute, but right at this moment, the biggest danger of World War III is in the Ukraine. And I'm on the same side as Steve Bannon, the same side as Candaceowens, the same side as Tuckercarlson on these matters. They are conservatives. I am a socialist. How did it get to this stage where most of the governments in Europe who are taking us to World War III would describe themselves as one form or other of socialist, social democrat, Christian democrat, centrists? It's the so-called left that want the wars and the so-called right that want to stop them. You see where I'm coming from here. Now, Nick Fuentes is, as you said, a figure of the farther right. He is, I would identify him, he wouldn't say this himself, but I would identify him as a white nationalist, as a person who doesn't like the fact that the United States is increasingly a black and Hispanic country, and where a bit of decency has been forced by legislation onto the state, onto the society, in how to deal with these once minorities, soon to be a majority in the United States. So Fuentes speaks to a sense of alienation of poor white people, or poor white working class people. His proscriptions are no solution at all. And I 100% disagree with him on them. But he identified that people like Charlie were Israel first, not America first. That people like Charlie, whilst they beat the MAGA drum, were really putting Israel first. But here's the rub. I have now viewed, and I'm actually not feeling that great either, so maybe I'll be watching TV at 5 a.m. in the morning. I am watching clip after clip after clip of Charliekirk beginning to turn. It's ironic. His outfit was called Turning Point USA, and I am watching in real time a man approaching a turning point and beginning to fall out with the Zionist donor class who put millions, tens of millions into his operation, and who had begun to threaten to withdraw it, or in the case of, you couldn't make this man's name up, Shillman, a guy called Robert Shillman, a Zionist billionaire in America, who actually withdrew his money. He didn't just threaten Charlie, he withdrew his money. And there was every possibility that if Charlie didn't change course, or rather go back to his old course, that Turning Point USA would have ended up bankrupt, that all of their donors would have pulled the plug, and all the people that worked with him and for him would have ended up on the Dan McGrew, as we say in Scotland, on the Unemployment Bureau. There were a lot of forces at work in the weeks prior to Charliekirk's assassination. But the official story doesn't want to go there. They want to pin this all on a patsy on a roof called Robinson. Now, some comments. Z.A. Lugazade says, Trump was just indirectly attacking Muslim Zohran Mamdani in New York City by attacking Muslim Sadiq Khan. I never thought of that. It's a fair point. Zohran looks like a good bet to be elected as the mayor of New York, and he will definitely be an improvement on the guy that's there now and on the other guys that have been there before him. But I caution against imagining that Zohran is a new dawn, because at the end of the day, he's still in the Democratic Party. And like AOC and others, it won't be long, indeed it's already happening, before he's tacking on the views that he once held that made him popular towards the mainstream of the Democratic Party. TB says, Trump fooled Arabs and Iran. Negotiations then set a trap for Israel to kill them. He used the same ruse, pretending to oppose the cokehead of Kiev. Everything has been a ruse. Same old establishment. Well, on the face of it, you appear to be right. Erobos, the legend, Erobos, Abzu, Lamashtu, our dear friend, says, politically, Americans are children. They view everything of importance in the light of sports teams, the blue team versus the red team. They are against their own best interest. And one or two other comments. Let me go through them while I'm waiting for the judge. The next one is Anthony Penza. Trump either had a bunch of low-functioning, near-catatonic vegetables or very high-functioning psychopaths. I couldn't have put that better myself, Anthony. I wish I'd said that, and I probably will. Neurodiverse seeks like-minded. That's a good title. Says, get your act together, your party. We need a strong anti-war party to coalesce around urgently. I'm very disappointed to learn this evening that Jeremy Corbyn's party, your party, will not allow dual membership, will not allow people to be members of more than one party, more than their party. I think that's going to cause problems for many other parties that have been deeply involved in the setting up of Jeremy's party. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. The conference in November might very well change that, and I hope very much that it will. It would mean that, for example, I could not be a member of Jeremy's party, even though the Workers' Party has applied to join. We'll have to resolve these things. But meanwhile, as it now looks unlikely that Jeremy's party will be up and running and registered for the local elections in May, we are going ahead making our own arrangements. And a big shout out and thanks to the people in Oldham, where the night before last, I think, or maybe even last night, I forget which day it is, the Workers' Party and the Oldham group of independents, who have tons of councillors there, almost control the council. We've reached an electoral agreement. We're backing them, they're backing us. We have a joint list of candidates. I'll be campaigning in Oldham for all of those candidates, whether they're Workers' Party candidates or not. That's the right approach, you know. That's the approach we need, because we have two enemies now. Our traditional enemy is Keir Starmer's misnamed Labour Party. But we have another enemy, and that is the danger of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party coming to power on a platform of racism, of hatred of people of colour, and on anti-immigrant rhetoric that reaches dangerous levels. So we have foes to deal with on two fronts. And that's going to require all of us to be together. We want Jeremy Corbyn to lead a coalition of the willing, a coalition of the people who want to see the end of Starmer and Farage. And I hope Jeremy is listening. Let's go to Missouri, where Walt is on the line to talk about Israel and Iran. Go ahead, Walt.
Yeah, George. I'm somebody that is not taken by surprise anymore by the actions of governments, particularly the U.S. government or the Israeli government. Yesterday on antiwar.com, there was an article stating that Israel basically now considers the aid convoy as Hamas. Now, you brought up the drones harassing them, let's call it that, in a bid to
they're bombing
get
them. I mean, these bombs haven't killed anybody yet, but they could easily have.
I imagine it won't be much longer before they actually go out and sink them. And it would not surprise me. The other thing that would not surprise me concerning Iran is that Israel will use their nuclear weapons on Iran. And when that happens, I can see the people in Dementia Central here, which are the people who call the Capitol, our fearless leader after his speech and shit yesterday, will get out there and brag about how we assisted the Israelis in bombing, dropping nuclear weapons on Iran. And if that was to happen, Pandora's box will definitely be open, which means, in my book, Jews and Americans around the world will be walking around with targets on their backs because there'll be a hell of a lot of angry people out there. And they're not going to care whether you favored Israel or not.
Well, that's powerful medicine, Walt. I disagree with it for the following reasons. If Israel used nuclear weapons on Iran, you know, nuclear weapons don't read maps, and nuclear radiation doesn't read maps. The nuclear winter will not only be felt in Iran, the radiation will not stay in Iran. Even the blast damage would affect Arab countries in the Persian Gulf that are the closest possible allies of Donald Trump. And so he could not possibly allow Israel to use nuclear weapons on Iran because the devastation in the region I'm now sitting in, from that nuclear exchange would be, well, unpredictable to say the least, and would make unlivable countries like Qatar, for example, countries like Oman, because the nuclear cloud would cross the sea very quickly and would blight and destroy all life in this region. So I don't believe that Israel would be permitted by the United States to use nuclear weapons on Iran. I do believe that Israel is about to attack Iran, and I do believe that Iran is about to attack them back. And that in itself is a terrifying danger to the entire region, including the spot that I'm sitting in now. And Trump is a fool if he does not persuade Netanyahu not to do this, because it will quickly become completely unpredictable in its outcome, because Iran already showed the strength and versatility of its missile technology, from drones to hypersonic. It already defeated Israel in the 12-day war, and Israel had to beg for a ceasefire through Donald Trump. Why would the outcome of the next war between Israel and Iran be any different? On the contrary, Iran is stronger now than it was in the 12-day war, which was only the other day. But Israel is not stronger. Far from it. Israel is weaker than it was, societally and militarily weaker, economically immeasurably weaker. So the outcome of a new Iran-Israel war will be the defeat of Israel. So Trump and his crew, who keep telling us how much they love Israel, they'd be better to advise Israel not to do something that is going to bring about their existential defeat. Now, my editor, who's a stickler for detail, he has to be. He's a top journalist of more than 50 years standing, insists that I make the following point. Just a heads up. Nicolas Cage in the movie Snake Eyes plays a detective called Rick Santoro, investigating the assassination of the Secretary of State, Charlie Kirkland, whose killing he witnesses at a boxing match. Kirkland is indeed shot through the left side of the neck. This is spooky. Tyler is the boxer who takes a dive to aid the killing, although he doesn't know that and is only doing it to clear his gambling debts. You may now know more about that Nicolas Cage movie than you care to, but it's one hell of a spooky coincidence. Rush is in Pennsylvania, wants to talk about the aforementioned charliekirk. Go ahead, Rush.
George Galloway, this is the second time I've called you. I talked to you about a month or so ago, and you're my hero,
okay,
man. And I
Thank
use
you,
your
brother.
phrase.
Thank you.
I use your phrase constantly. Everybody gets it. The Democrats and the Republicans, it's two cheeks of the same butt. I'll put it that way.
Exactly.
Now, it's
Exactly.
funny you just mentioned this movie. George, you might not know it, but Pennsylvania, we used to have a senator, Rick Santorum. Is that a name that you just mentioned in this Nicolas Cage movie, Rick Santorum?
It is. I mean, the coincidences get curiouser and curiouser.
Check that out. But it sounds very interesting. This whole thing's interesting about, charliekirk. When it happened, I was dealing with a sick dog and that, so I recorded everything. I mean, I'm a huge Tucker Carlson fan. I quit watching the TV, Fox News, when I've been following Tucker for 27 years. And him and Charlie were best of friends. And Tucker spoke at that memorial service. The next day, the New York Post said, Tucker Carlson's, they didn't use the word anti-Semitic. He was trying to say that Israel had something to do with it and this and that, and, he didn't. But candaceowens is pretty interested in it.
If the cap fits, we have a saying, Rush, I don't know if you got it there. If the cap fits, wear it. That's all he was saying.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how much time I have here. Okay. On, nobody is listening. Putin. Now, this Putin thing, well, first of all, the Gaza, I listen to a few conservative shows here. Man, you can't even mention Gaza. And I voted for Trump 3 times. Well, I'd never vote for Kamala Harris no matter what. But every time they mentioned Trump, he spoke to the United Nations, first of all at the Kirk Memorial. Charlie's wife gave a speech there, and I don't know how she did it, but she said she forgives the shooter. Now, then Trump is after her, and right away he said, boy, Erica, I can't believe like you do. I hate my... Now, that should have been a Ronald Reagan type thing to where he could have brought this country together. At the United Nations yesterday, I watched him for as long as I could. I'll tell you what he's selling so many wolf tickets. He just thinks that we're not top on the list here anymore, man. You got this BRICS thing going on. The United States our cities are in turmoil, every one.
Oh, terrible.
And sooner or later, a Democrat's going to get back in that office, and when they do, because nobody's going to jail, you have Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, and she come out. I heard her say, "Well, we're going to come down on hate speech." Now, we have freedom of speech, and who's going to say what hate speech is? That's a very slippery slope. You know what I mean?
Very slippery. And the man to answer it is coming up right after this short break. Thank you, Rush in Pennsylvania. The judge, here comes the judge. Judge Andrew Napolitano coming up in the last half hour. Stay tuned.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I am that haggis. Now, alas, my good wife Gayatri is now in Dubai, but she's still on the plane, on the tarmac. And therefore, alas, her many fans will be disappointed. She won't be on the show tonight. But the judge is here, Andrew Napolitano. And I'm very glad to call him the host of Judging Freedom, because our freedom now hangs in the balance. Judge Napolitano, thanks for joining us. There's so much I'd like to talk to you about. I know that you are friendly with Donald Trump. I don't want to be insulting to him, but I thought he embarrassed your country at the United Nations yesterday. What did you think?
Well, George, it's always a pleasure to be with you, my dear friend, and apologies for my coming on not at the appointed time. And thank you for your generosity by giving me this time with you. I thought he embarrassed the United States and embarrassed himself with the rantings and ravings against the United Nations and about climate control. And then even worse, George, the statements he made afterwards about Ukraine, that Ukraine can, in his word, all in caps, win and actually take back Crimea and the Donbass and all the regions now returned by the Russian military to the Russian Federation. This type of statement is inconceivable. Not only is it not possible, it's not even conceivable. It's not even worthy of discussing, other than to try and figure out what's in the man's brain. The best I can say is that he's teasing everybody and wants to throw people off. The worst I can say is he listens to whoever he's been speaking to last, which in this case was probably either Sebastian Gorka or General Keith Kellogg, because the two of them are of this view that with enough military equipment, Ukraine, which has very little left of its military, can somehow send the Russians home packing. They do not understand the origins of the war. The origins of the war are the United States of America and NATO. NATO expanding to Russian borders, and the United States, along with the British intelligence, CIA and MI6, candidly probably led by MI6, perpetrated a coup against the popularly elected and relatively neutral president in 2014 in Ukraine. And then when Trump came into the White House, he armed Ukraine to the teeth. And then, of course, he was no longer a president, and Joe Biden decided to fund this war. So I'm very disappointed in President Trump. I am equally disappointed, George, in Gaza. This is one of the most horrific events in the post-World War II era. The Congress of the United States and the White House are in a vice grip controlled by the American Zionist oligarchs who know if they have dirt on Donald Trump. I don't know if they have threatened Donald Trump. I know they have given his campaigns enormous amounts of money. The public in America is turning on the Netanyahu regime. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people or so-called anti-Semitism. This is a revulsion at what the criminal apartheid government of Israel is doing to the poor people of Gaza, and Donald Trump doesn't lift a finger against it. I'm sorry I went on so long, George, but I wanted to give you my thoughts about Trump on all three areas: what he said at the UN, what he's doing with Ukraine, and what he's doing with Gaza.
Your Honor, you could never go on too long for me. I could listen to you, and frequently have listened to you all night. Let's take the issues seriatim. I was in Moscow when the Truth Social post was made. I was in Moscow when the speech at the UN was made. I told our earlier guest, our good friend Daniel McAdam, the stock market in Moscow crashed. It fell very substantially. And the public mood was, well, it looks like that war that Donald Trump was going to solve in 24 hours will probably still be going on 24 months from now. It's quite clear, unless Trump was joking, unless he's going to pull a rabbit out of a hat tomorrow, that Trump has given NATO, and by the way, Your Honor, he keeps referring to NATO as a third party, in the third person, as if America wasn't in NATO, as if America wasn't the main thing in NATO, and paying almost 3/4 of its costs. He's basically saying, well, NATO can make war on them if it likes, as if he wasn't its leader. But whichever way you dice it, this week seems to suggest that this war in Ukraine is going to drag on and on and on, and will be settled only on the battlefield.
Well, our two mutual friends who are military experts, the great Scott Ritter, actually three, the great Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson and the great Colonel Douglas McGregor, agree with you that it'll be settled on the battlefield, but they don't think it's going to go on for 24 months because there just will not be enough human beings alive in the Ukrainian military to use the military equipment that NATO will be sending to it. General Kellogg made this ridiculous statement recently. If Putin had a real army, he'd be in Kyiv right now. Well, Putin doesn't want to be in Kyiv. President Putin's goal is to degrade the Ukrainian military so that the Russian people don't have to go through this for the next 20 years. And how General Kellogg, a retired 3-star general, cannot understand that must mean that he's blinded by ideology. But I agree with you entirely. Even in the Truth Social, Trump refers to his own tweets as truth. Even in the Truth Social, where he referred to Ukraine can win, he said with the help of NATO. Of course, as you say, forgetting that for every dollar spent, 75 cents of it came from the United States. He also seems to forget that the CIA is on the ground in Ukraine, helping identify Russian targets for Ukrainian military. And the American military is in Wiesbaden, Germany, helping to direct the propulsion of American and British missiles against Russian troops. He seems to forget that those events, those processes, only occur with his permission a permission he could terminate with a telephone call. So,
and of course,
if he's joking,
the satellites also, Judge.
Correct.
The American satellites are completely indispensable. The war would end if American intelligence from American satellites was discontinued.
Correct. You alluded to the fact that his bizarre statement about Ukraine can win might be a joke. There are a lot of people here in the U.S. and friends of yours and mine in Moscow with whom I communicated today who do believe it might be a joke. But George, if it's a joke, it's a sad, sick joke, which is a window into a mind that I don't want to go there because I'm afraid what I'm going to find.
Well, I know you don't want to go there, and because I've tested that before with you, and I don't want to spoil or despoil in any way your relationship with Donald Trump, but my thoughts at the end of his free-form stream of consciousness was that this is not a well man.
No, I'm sorry to say I agree with you, George. I mean, he's my friend, but I'm in this same business that you are, and like you, I have to be intellectually honest. And I'm sorry that I agree with you. A friend of mine texted me last night when this bizarre statement came out and said, this is 25th Amendment territory. The 25th Amendment allows the vice president and a majority of the president's cabinet to depose him. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen, but the person that said this to me is someone for whose intellect I have enormous respect, and it has people thinking, to use the language of the streets, there are some screws loose up there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's turn, Your Honor, to Gaza. Donald Trump met with all the Arab leaders, many of them heads of state, presidents. The Emir of Qatar was there. President Erdogan of Turkey was there. Most of the Arab and Muslim countries were represented at the meeting. Donald Trump said it was his most important meeting of this current session of the General Assembly. What could he have said to them, though? If they're that important, and I agree they are, to America's interests, to the interests of stability in the world, bringing to an end slaughter and so on, what could he have said to them about the fact that the Palestinians are being massacred in plain sight, the West Bank is being settled by illegal settlers in plain sight, that Israel has declared there will be no Palestinian state? What's left to talk about? How does Donald Trump square that with these Arab and Muslim leaders?
You know, he not only has, it's a great question, George, he not only has the tendency of repeating what has been whispered into his ear last. I suggested Sebastian Gorka, who's a notorious whisperer and who's almost always with him, and who's a fanatic Zionist and a fanatic neocon. But he also has a tendency to want to please his audience. The statement about Ukraine winning was made in the presence of President Zelensky. So Trump, who has a weakness in that he wants to be loved, often says what he thinks the audience wants to hear. Look, my heart is exactly where yours is, but I have no praise for those Arab leaders with whom he met. They are gutless. The Emir of Qatar should have said, get out of our air base. You're going to allow this to happen? You're going to reduce our air defenses? You're going to turn off our radar? You're not a friend or an ally. You're a tool of Bibi Netanyahu. And Erdogan should say, we're not going to sell the Israelis any more oil. Not a drop of oil. I don't care if my oil companies go bankrupt. I'm going to stop the slaughter in Gaza. We have another mutual friend that we both like and admire, my former Fox colleague and fellow podcaster, and still my friend, and I know yours, Tucker Carlson. Tucker, 2 days ago, while interviewing Glenn Greenwald, said that he has spoken to people in Israel who have been in Benjamin Netanyahu's presence and have heard Netanyahu boast that he controls Trump and he controls the Congress of the United States, boasting and bragging about it. I believe that Tucker believes the accuracy and honesty of those in Israel who told him this. And Tucker, notwithstanding what happened to charliekirk, has the moral courage and backbone to say this on his show. And I'm going to guess you agree with me. None of this surprises me, George.
None of it surprises me, but I'm being surprised hourly. And I'm grateful for your time, Judge. And this is the last question, but it's a big one. I'm being surprised hourly by the evidence that is emerging, which is not conclusive in one form or another yet. But one thing is clear to me, that the FBI, Kashpatel, official narrative of how Charlie was killed is not only untrue, but cannot be true. And if they're lying about the weapon, if they're lying about the shooter, that means they're lying about everything. And that means there's a big conspiracy involved in this case. What's your take?
It's hard for me to believe that this crazy young man in love with somebody who's half a man and half a woman, as bizarre as that is, could have pulled this off on his own for the reasons stated in his email, in his text messages to the lover and to others. I haven't looked at all of the evidence. I will examine what has come out in the past 2 days, and I'll examine it wearing my judicial hat with perfect neutrality, as if I didn't know and didn't like Charlie, and as if I respected the FBI. But I got to tell you, the FBI has no respect, commands no respect in this country, whether it's run by Bob Ray or Jim Comey or Bob Mueller or Kashpatel. There's just no respect for the FBI any longer. But the truth will have to come out. We do know that Charlie was under tremendous pressure. See the interview he gave my another former Fox colleague and dear friend and friend of yours, megynkelly, after he was browbeaten by billackman and a bunch of wealthy American Zionist billionaires. They offered him $100 million in financing if he would change his views on Netanyahu and the slaughter in Gaza, and he turned them down. See how he is shaking during this interview with Megyn, which is just 2 days later. This was all a month before he was murdered. And for those who rejoice in the beautiful words of Mrs. Kirk, who forgave her husband's murderer, and her words were beautiful. You know what her father is retired from doing as a living? He's an Israeli arms merchant.
I'm almost speechless to learn that, and I've only time now to ask you about the rally with all of our friends that you've got coming up.
Oh, that's so good of you.
Where it is,
that's so
and
good
how
of you to
people
mention
can
that.
support it.
Our wonderful friend, Gerald Celente, who fights every day for peace, runs a rally the last Saturday of every September in a town called Kingston, New York, which is arguably the birthplace of democracy in America. The rally draws about 400 or 500 people, zero media. The media refuses to cover it because it's always an anti-war rally. The speakers will be, in addition to Gerald, the great former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, the great former CIA agent who now thinks the CIA should be disbanded, Ray McGovern, the great former Marine and campaigner for peace, Scott Ritter, the great songwriter and singer, Roger Waters, Gerald Celente himself, Joe Loria, who runs Consortium News, and your humble correspondent. And we will bring the house down with arguments on freedom of speech, war and peace, the proper role of the government in our lives. But as I said to you, George, there will be zero media there. They couldn't care less what we say. It doesn't deter us. It energizes us. This is in Kingston, New York. If you live anywhere in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut metropolitan area, this Saturday, no admission fee, this Saturday, September 27th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, local time.
There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be than there. Alas, I cannot be. I wouldn't get past the border control. But if I could teletransport myself, like Baron Trump in the 1890s, being teletransported onto Times Square by a rocket man called Elon, I would be in Kingston, New York. What
well,
a
if
platform.
you were in
Gerald
Kingston, New York, if you were in Kingston, New York, the size of the crowd would grow in multiples.
That's so kind of you. And we will all be watching, and everyone should watch, because the media might not be there, Your Honor, but the social media from the people who are there can go much wider than the mainstream.
Well, Gerald will stream it on his site, which is called Trends Journal, and we will stream it on Judging Freedom.
Let's all get behind that great rally for freedom with that great platform, Kingston, New York. If you are lucky enough to live in that area, get down there and let's make this the biggest one that our lovely friend Gerald Celente has ever organized. Judge Andrew Napolitano, it's a privilege, sir, always to interview you. Thanks for joining us indeed. And let's go to New York for what will have to be, I think, the last call of the evening, unless I've got my times mixed up. It's Kamal in New York on MAGA. Go ahead, Kamal.
Yes, good afternoon or good evening at your place. George, thank you for taking my call, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all this Scott Ritter and Judge Napolitano and all these guys who stand up. They're leaders of justice and fairness and humanity. Yes.
Amen.
I admire listening to them, and I consider them as my heroes. By the way, before I talk about MAGA, I missed what Judge Napolitano said about. I forgot about what Judge Napolitano said about Kingston. When would be that meeting?
It's on Saturday, this Saturday at 2 o'clock in Kingston. Okay. All roads lead to Kingston, New York. It's the best rally for actual real freedom with the best speakers in America. Will be there. I honestly believe if I could, I'd be on the plane to New York and be there myself. But I can't because Donald Trump and Marco Rubio wouldn't allow me in once they checked my social media. Go on, Kamal. The floor is yours, and the show is coming to an end.
Okay, quickly, maybe I will. If you will be on the air, maybe I'll put it live for you. But in any case, I wanted to talk about MAGA, which has surprised me because Michael Savage, he has a large audience of conservatives, and he's a very strong conservative. And he surprised me by talking about charliekirk, about he doesn't believe nothing of what happened. He doesn't believe the script. he was talking about this is nonsense about what the FBI are doing, and he doesn't believe what it has to be something wrong. He said, and he never cursed, but he did curse profanity because he was so mad. I haven't seen him for 15 years, but it was a surprise last week. However, I think everybody in MAGA, they're retrieving slowly because I think some of them are very honest and they think that they've been insulted. But all this charade of, and they see what's happening in Palestine and all that. But this is what I wanted to talk about, the MAGA with especially one of their leaders, I consider him. Even he is a non-grata for Donald Trump and all that. They don't like him. They used to like him. But I think he's more honest than most of them. And for what you call the theme that you said, the questionnaire about will Netanyahu, he will try, he can. If he will. I mean, if he can, he will, but he won't be able. I don't think he can be erasing Palestinians. That will be forever. That will be forever. And free Palestine. And thank you very much.
No, la shukran wajib. I would myself have voted your way. I don't think that Netanyahu will erase Palestine. I believe that as long as there are two Palestinians, man and woman, left alive, Palestine will never be erased. And having been in the cause for 50 years, I can tell you that it is palpable everywhere, even on the MAGA American right, that Palestine is an idea that's not going to die, that Israel will be erased before Palestine will be erased. And indeed, as you know, it's my wish and hope that it is. Kamal in New York, probably our last caller, unless I'm miscalculating the time. But I do need to give a big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been onto the MOATS.tv website, as I begged everybody to do. James Glass, who is an honored weekly donor of ours. Paweł Milnakarjic. Paweł, you have to forgive me. It's late at night. I've got jet lag, and I just couldn't pronounce your family name properly. But Paweł, Amira Kataria, Dennis Freeman, and Hugh Williams. Please scan the QR code now and or visit moats.tv. You'll get your name on the screen, but more importantly, you'll make sure that Wednesday's Moats can continue. Last call. Okay then, last call. Jack in New York on Kennedy and Kirk. I couldn't resist it. Jack, the floor is yours.
Love your shows, George.
Thanks, mate.
I'm watching on TV, so a little delay. What I want to say about Kennedy is about 25 years ago, my son and I went out to Dallas to visit my sister, and while we were there, I went down to Dealey Plaza, and I was under my opinion is that he was shot from the fence. So there was a gentleman there, I can't remember his name now, who was very instrumental in finding out, about how Kennedy was shot, and he alleged he was shot from the fence. So I walked up behind the fence, and in my opinion, where he was shot from, and I made pretend I had a rifle, and I put my rifle in place, and just then, an identical Continental convertible with look-alike Kennedys and look-alike Connollys came cruising by, and the car slowed to 6 miles an hour, it was alleged. So the car slowed down quite a bit, and I made pretend the shot, and it wasn't a difficult shot. Regarding Charlie Kirk, there was a gentleman in one of the videos with a white baseball cap and a white shirt who was standing to Charlie's right and slightly behind, and he had a phone that he was pointing towards Charlie. And the question about mass shootings came up to Charlie. And right when that came up to Charlie, the gentleman with the white cap, he scruffed his head and he hit his cheek. And then immediately after that was the shot. So on another program, I don't know if I should mention it, DEFCON 1, they showed that repeatedly. And so I thought about it, and my thought was that the kid was a dupe, if you will, if that's the correct word. And he had a fine weapon to do the shot, and he got excited. He knew he was going to do it. He knew what he was supposed to do. And instead of waiting and, all right, okay, he gave me the sign, so now I'll put the weapon down. He was probably already in place and ready to take the shot, and quickly took the shot. So they said they discounted the guy with the white baseball cap as being a friend of Charlie's. Well, well known is that sometimes your closest friends are worst enemies. So
you can be ruled out as a suspect because you were a friend of the victim, because many people are killed by people close to them, or that they believed were close to them, or whose interests might have begun to be threatened by the particular line or course of action that you were taking. I too have often been in Dallas on Dealey Plaza, and as someone who grew up with a portrait of Jack Kennedy on my wall as a kid, as the first Irish Catholic president of the United States, his death meant and means a lot to me. And the more I look back at Murder Most Foul, as Bob Dylan recently put it in an epic that he wrote on the subject, that was the death of America for me in November of 1963. And I see uncanny parallels with the Charliekirk affair, not just where the fatal shot ended up in the throat, but also in the absurdity of the official narrative. It's not just that it's not true. It's that it could not be true. That Tyler Robinson, with that weapon, fired that shot because the angle of the fatal shot came from the other side and maybe from behind. And it was not that Mauser round that killed him. The hole in his throat that we saw was an exit and not an entrance. And when I look, as I'm now increasingly looking, at the nature of the pandemonium after the fatal shot was fired, the highly suspicious characters who are around the death scene, handing things over to each other, furtively pocketing them. It was a professional hit job, with the scene being cleared immediately of anything, including the camera, behind Charlie's head that might illuminate the truth. But they didn't count on the sheer number of cameras and camera angles that are now very clearly central to this investigation. It'll have to be a public investigation because the FBI are not budging and want to close the case with Tyler Robinson as the patsy. But the public will never stop investigating this case, never. And you heard from the Honorable Judge Andrew Napolitano, he intends to look at it with his expert judicial eye. We will get to the bottom of this, and the bottom of this might be very ugly indeed. Jack in New York, thanks for bringing the show to a close. My apologies for going over time, and my apologies that my good wife Gayatri couldn't make it in time to give her normal social media news roundup. But I promise you, God willing, both she and I will be back in Blighty on Sunday, and we'll both be presenting the mother of all talk shows. Thanks to two great guests, many great calls and comments, but above all, a final exhortation. Go to the website, MOATS.tv, and leave a donation of whatever you can. It's been marvelous. I'm off now into the Dubai night, where it's midnight here.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.